Good evening, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Monday Night Must See TV with the Hudson Valley Squares. We got Nick Franco, Ryan Skow, and Chris Sallow. Today, we got another cool rant for you. Today is all about those second album slip-ups. So basically, a band releases a kick-ass debut that either was a big seller or influential album. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. And then they come out with a second album, maybe not quite so good. Maybe even is pretty terrible, but doesn't quite measure up to that first one. So I've asked everybody to put at least three together. If we have more time, we'll get to more of them, but we'll kind of go around. I think today we're going to start, we're going to go Nick, Ryan, Chris, and then myself. So I'll have Nick give us his first choice.
Awesome. So I went with a band that when they came out with their debut, I was just expanding. You know, I was 18 years old. Everything was like, that was a lot of new music I was discovering. And one of the bands that I got into when they came out was Machine Head from Oakland, California. And their debut, Burn My Eyes, was just a really, really, heavy. It had sort of a hardcore attitude, but it was still very metal, very California-ish. But, we used to my friends and I used to blast that album all over the place. It was just a scorcher of a debut. A Thousand Lies, Blood for Blood, the title track. We used to just go nuts with it, and it looked like they were onto something really, really great. And only a couple years later, they come out with their next album, which their sophomore album called "The More Things Change," and I don't even think it was like a couple steps down. I think it was just absolutely terrible. It sounded immediately like that new metal sound, the way the guitars were tuned, and the vocals were terrible. And to me, I've never went back into that band. I thought The More Things Change was a terrible, terrible sophomore slump from a very promising band in Machine Head.
I don't know. Ask you, Nick, can I ask you ever hear their third album, The Burning Red?
No.
The second one's a detour into new metal.
Yeah. That's what I had a feeling. I never got back into them.
Got a lot worse.
Yeah, Rob. Yeah, Flynn strikes me, the singer. He strikes me as like kind of a whiny guy, anyway. And I was like up here with them, and then it just crashed.
I don't think they ever hit their stride again until The Blackening. That was a long time.
I know has gotten critical acclaim. My friend was I have a friend that was always like, "Oh, you got to listen to this." I never really did, but he loves it. But The More Things Change The More Things Change, bad.
Chris, you're on mute, but it looks like you got something to say.
Damn it, get off my lawn.
You cannot say this.
I was going to say, as soon as Nick started saying Machine Head, I was like, oh yeah, The Burning Red. Completely forgetting about the second record, which, I think from what I remember was bad, but not as bad as the third record. But I guess the third record was so bad it made me forget about the second record.
I kind of felt the same way when Nick mentioned it. Yeah, because the third one is just holy crap.
Right. Yeah. But talk about a band that had huge promise, was on the right path, and then things just kind of, took a turn.
Yeah.
Yep. That happens.
Inexplicable. But...
All right, Ryan, you're up. What do you got?
All right. So I went through my whole music collection. And this is the biggest, I'll start with the best one. This is the biggest drop off in quality I could find between two albums. Now, for all three of these albums, I only have the first good album because I'm not in the business of owning crappy music. So I don't have any of the crappy second albums. So the first album, the great one, is Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing by Discharge, which it's a hardcore punk album, but if you're real into the history of like thrash, black death metal, this is like a seminal influential album. It's like, right, huge influence on Slayer. Jeff Hanneman, he was big into hardcore, huge influence on Metallica. This was like one of those like early British old hardcore punk bands that was like, it's a great album on its own, but like its impact on metal was massive too. And then a couple of years later, in 1986, they put out an album called Grave New World, which is not even hardcore punk, and it's a total detour into like hair metal. And you can't even be like, well, it's actually, I think, I'm going to say this on camera here, it's worse than Cold Lake in my estimation. It's a bigger dive into like crappy hair metal than even Celtic Frost took. It is just abominable. It is so bad. There's no redeeming qualities from this band that put out this awesome, influential album that had influence on Bathory, Slayer, like all these great bands back in the day. Just like a crappy, sounds like a Faster Pussycat album. So that is my first choice.
I have not heard it. Sounds like I don't need to hear it.
You don't need it, but this one is great. I love the crap out of that. But yeah, the second one is I don't own it because it's just garbage. But I've listened to it over the years on YouTube when people mention it to me, and I'm like, oh, what the heck happened here? Jesus. And apparently they got better again after that. But I never bothered to investigate any of that stuff. I just stick with the first album, some of the early singles and EPs.
Cool. All right, Chris, you're up.
All right. My pick is kind of timely with what happened in the music industry last week. I used to collect Kerangs. I remember in like 85, 86, I got a box of old Kerangs from one of those record collector shows, and there was a big article in there which blew my mind at the time. How David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar were having a huge war in the British press with one another. And this was around like 82, 83. And it just blew my mind because like at the time, Sammy had, just become the new lead singer of Van Halen. And it talked in this article about how Eddie was really influenced by the first Montrose record, which I had never heard. And it just went on and on how it was, basically Van Halen like 4 years before the first Van Halen record. So I went out and got it, and it blew me away. It's an unbelievable record. It's Van Halen, but a couple of years earlier. It's on the same label. Ted Templeman produced it. So then I went out and got the second record, Paper Money, and it's fucking awful. I have the vinyl in somewhere. I should have got it because it's in mint condition because I played it once. There you go. It's
I'm glad I picked a bunch today because that was going to be my first choice here. That's all right. You're back on mute again. You're up.
You took Pete's choice. That's it. You're on mute.
I was going to say, other than I Got the Fire, I can't stand that Paper Money. I mean, I listened to the first record 1,000 times, and Paper Money literally once, 25 years ago, and I put it back in the sleeve and put it on the shelf, and that's it. I never listened to it again until yesterday, and I was like, yeah, this record still totally sucks.
This like maybe three really. I Got the Fire and 2 other songs are really good. The rest of it's just like what happened, right?
Right.
I just love this album. I think I'll stick with that.
Iron Maiden covers I've Got the Fire, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Well, there are stories that if you read Martin Popoff's Ronnie Montrose book, that he was having a real issue with Sammy being kind of like the focal point of the band, and that he kind of toned this album down because of that, which really is silly because this band should have been enormous, right?
Unbelievable. That first record, just incredible.
Yeah. All right. Well, since I can't pick Paper Money for mine, I will make my second choice here. So you guys remember, what was it, 80? Was it 81, 82? I don't remember exactly when it came out. All of a sudden you heard this big prog rock supergroup called Asia, right? They come out with that debut album, great Roger Dean, Serpent on the cover, all these hit singles. It sells like millions and millions of copies, blah, 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 right? And then they followed it up with like a year and a half later with this, which is like all ballads, sappy, poppy songs. Maybe, I don't know, Don't Cry was the single. Yeah, that's all right.
So freaking soft. It's such a mellow album. It's
really mellow. And it's almost like it's not even good mellow. It's like they use all their great songs and all the great melodies and all the great playing on the debut. And then this comes out and it's just like what happened here?
I don't know.
It's like this is Steve Howe. This is Carl Palmer. This is John Wetton. I mean, where's like all the meat here? It's almost all ballads. And granted, it's not like it's the worst thing I've ever heard. It's not. But compared to that first album, it like fell off a cliff. And it's just, I maybe throw this on once every 10 years, and then I put it on and I can't even get through the whole thing because I'm like, this is just not that good. Whereas the debut is classic. I never get tired of it. It's got great songs. So yeah, that is my first choice for today. Back to Nick.
Well, so I'm going with it really, I guess, was considered a side project, but now that they have 3 albums total, I think whatever. Well, it's still a band. and I'm referring to Demons and Wizards, which is the combination of John Schaefer from Iced Earth with Hansi Kusch from German power metal band Blind Guardian. And independently, those two bands are two of my favorite traditional metal bands of all time. And when they got together in the late 90s, they came out with their debut Demons and Wizards, which to me remains a stone cold classic in power metal. Just phenomenal choruses, guitar work, catchiness, everything you could possibly want.
Green.
Oh yeah, oh my God, yeah, just an unbelievable ballad. I mean, just a moment in time, just absolutely incredible album, Demons and Wizards. And then it was like 6 years later, their schedules allowed them to make another album again, and it was called Touched by the Crimson King, influenced by Stephen King's The Dark Tower. And the artwork was right on time, it was beautiful. The everything about it seemed like it was going to be good, but it just didn't. It's not terrible. It's not like my first choice. It's not terrible by any means. It just, they were so far up here with their debut that the sophomore album, Touched by the Crimson King, it just never made a huge impact on me. There's a couple of okay tracks in it.
Kind of boring, I think. I don't know. I love that first one too, but I think it's boring.
Yeah, it's kind of boring. Like Beneath These Waves is okay, Terror Train. But yeah, it just doesn't grab you. Seize the Day kind of has some epic choruses, but it really just doesn't make the same impact. And it's very hard when you reach that high. It's not that easy to come to it again, even for musicians like that. So yeah, I'd have to pick Touched by the Crimson King. That was a disappointment.
All right, Ryan, you're up.
All right, so I'm going to piggyback on Nick's statement there. Another side project, one of the quintessential metal side projects. Some very famous bands, or some very famous guys from some very famous 80s bands got together. And they put out this in 1985, which should have stayed their only album. And it's Stormtroopers of Death, Speak English or Die, it was just like you said, it's just a moment in time, the sense of humor, the riffs, the intensity. It's like a perfect album. Came out, and that should have been it. And then many, many years later, I think in the late 90s, they got back together, and they did an album called Bigger Than the Devil, which it's like telling the same jokes again 20 years later, 15 years later. And it just doesn't have that same intensity. It's the same guys, but it just falls flat. It doesn't have any, I don't know. I even saw them on that tour, and they were good live, and they played a lot of stuff in this first album. But that second album, I think I've listened to it maybe 10 times over the last decade or 2 decades or so. It's got, I don't know, it never had any of the same intensity and like the laughs that this first one does, because this is still, decades later, the first one I think is still iconic, hilarious, good. The riffs are amazing, vocals are great, lyrics are ridiculous, offensive and silly, and that should have been all they wrote, but nope, they couldn't resist getting back together for another go around.
I always thought that the first Stormtroopers of Death album, and I remember because I bought that when it came out. I mean, that was huge. I was still in college in New Paltz, and we listened to that all the time. But yeah, you always got the feeling that should have been a one and done thing. It was kind of like of its time, and it's like they struck gold with that. But you knew that was never going to happen again. Then they did the MOD thing, and that was kind of like, this is okay.
It never had the same thing. It didn't have the same impact.
Yeah. That's. I never even listened to the second one.
It's so boring. I don't know. I sold it a couple years ago. I did buy it, and I sold it, and I don't know. It's like the second Demons and Wizards. It's not like aggressively terrible, but if you listen to it, you're like, who cares? I'll go put on something else, or go put on the debut again.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't mess with a classic, right?
You cannot.
Yeah, no, that was a good pick. I wish I had thought of that one. Yeah, I didn't think of that one, because that second SOD album that really sucked.
It is.
And I love that first record.
The first one's amazing. It's like one of the best 80s. It's an 80s classic. You can't mess with it. But yeah, it should have been the only thing they ever did, and that's it. All she wrote. Yeah. And
All right, Chris, what do you got?
All right, this one. Lots of people love or hate this record. I don't know. When I was 16, I was a huge thrash fan, and I was listening to the metal station, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna play this next song, and if you can, call up, and the first person that can name the song, the album, and the name of the band, you get 2 free tickets and a copy of this record called Appetite for Destruction." So it was so easy because I loved the band Metal Church, so they played the song Metal Church by the band Metal Church from the album Metal Church. So I called up, I won the tickets. They sent me the record. It was the band's first ever show on the East Coast. My brother-in-law and I went. The band was awesome. That first record, I really dug it, Appetite for Destruction. And then 4 years later, they put out these Use Your Illusion records, which completely sucked. 30 songs over the two records. I mean, talk about an album. The two albums, like what on vinyl, it's probably like 6 albums worth of filler. I mean, maybe if you cut that down to 10 songs, you could get like a good record. But of course, somebody was greedy and they were trying to make more money, and it worked. But those albums sucked, and that for me as a fan, that right there, I wrote Guns N' Roses off and never listened to them again. So that's my pick. Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, which it sucks.
Good choice.
I think there was a lot of good songs on those albums. I think if you would have, you're right, if they would have compressed it down to I like it. Probably
how many songs are on the combined albums? Did you say 30?
30. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I'll give you maybe 4 of them are pretty good.
Yeah,
I won't give you any more than that. And you know what? I'm saying good because at some point in my life, I actually liked them a little bit. I never, ever need to hear any of those songs off of those albums or the debut ever again. I know I get roasted about that.
There with you.
The debut album is a classic for what it is. I never need to hear it again. Right. I will give them their due, but you know what? They've been milking that debut album their whole career.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And, Guns N' Roses fans once again are going to hate me now, but it's a classic.
Yeah,
I get it. It's influential, made a ton of money. I get it, but I never need to hear that album ever again.
My favorite GNR song is Estranged off of I forget which Illusion it's on, maybe the blue one, but I don't know. I like probably about 4 to 6 of those songs, and I like them a lot, but the rest of it is trash. And
I thought November Rain when it first came out was great.
Yeah.
But then they played that video every half hour
and over again. Yeah.
It was on the radio all the time. And then after a while you heard it enough, then it's like, oh my God, the song is 7-8 minutes long. It's like, Jesus, I'm never going to get this time back in my life again. It's like,
what's going on at this wedding? Why is everybody sad?
I feel like every bar I went to in my 20s, the soundtrack was just Guns N' Roses over and over and over and over. So I go on with you. I don't need to hear those songs ever fucking again.
Well, now the soundtrack is Nickelback, so it didn't get any better.
I got lucky on that. That never happened.
Man. All right. Well, mine's not going to be as good as yours, Chris. But back in what year? It was early 70s. I don't know. I think 70 or 71. This band comes out of Scotland called Nazareth. They released this pretty kick-ass debut, Pretty Heavy. Who's this band with this raspy-throated singer and these big guitar riffs and barnstorming bluesy heavy rock songs, right? Debut kicks ass. Whoa, this is great. Then not even a year later, they come out with this album called Exercises. All right, cool. Let's check this out. And there's 10 songs on there. And every one of them is acoustic, rootsy, kind of bluesy, not very interesting. It's what in the hell happened to all that heaviness from the debut? And the weird thing is, this album is kind of like an outlier in their whole catalog of the 70s. There's not another album that they did that sounds like this. All the other albums are pretty heavy and lively and very memorable. And this is just I don't know, not very good. Probably for me, out of all their classic albums from that time period, completely forgettable. I mean, it's I almost can say I never need to listen to this again. So I don't know. Not very good. That's my choice. Chris, we lost your camera. You still there?
Poor Chris.
He's been abducted by aliens.
I guess.
Just zoomed him right there.
There you go.
I'm done. I've had enough.
I think you got to graduate from get off my lawn to get out of my house, because you obviously got that are messing with your computer terminal there.
Damn.
Gremlins.
All right, Nick, back to you.
All right. So this choice, I want to make it clear that I do like this album, but when you compare it to the first one, it just can't stand up to it. I'm referring to the Norwegian extreme black metal band Mayhem, which debuted with the seminal, mind-blowing, influential, genre-defining De Mysteris Dom Satanas, with Tilla, this Hungarian madman, on vocals. And I mean, it just sounds like it's recorded in a big giant, well, it was in a big giant hall. And for viewers not familiar with it, because black metal tends to kind of isolate some people, but very extreme record, but just for that genre, untouchable.
It's a perfect record for that genre. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, back
change a damn thing.
Yep. So many, like 6 years passed, I think, before they came out with their sophomore album, and almost a completely different lineup. I mean, I think only Hellhammer, the drummer, was on it. Remained maybe one or two. Hellhammer, different vocalist. And by that point, black metal had definitely branched out into different paths of experimentation and progressive leanings and all kinds of stuff. And the second album, Grand Declaration of War, which came out in 2000, on its own is pretty interesting. It has some electronic beats, spoken word type stuff. It has black metal. It has, it's just all over the place. And people slagged it off. They hated it. This isn't Mayhem. This isn't black metal. I'm not one of those people. I'm willing to make room for artists to, branch out and try some new things. But I think when you compare the two, this one just did not have the same impact. They couldn't have the same impact. And even though it's okay,
I love that album, but I think you're right.
Yeah, I was gonna say I dig it too, and it reminds me of like if Mayhem recorded a Voivod record.
It is.
Like it definitely gives me a Voivod vibe.
Yeah,
riffs are very Voivodish. Yeah, I love the shit out of it. Yeah, I think you're right. It can't stand up to De Mysteris.
Right.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Different band, different sound, different era already, right? Because all those years.
The only one.
Yep. Yeah. That's a good choice. Good choice.
But
good choice, though. Yeah.
All right, Ryan, what do you got?
All right, so I had a hard time with this because most of my favorite albums, I think I said in that group text, are usually the second albums for bands like Hell Awaits, Killers, Paranoid. You go on and on and on all day. And so to find second albums that really sucked was tough. But I did find another good one from the Florida death metal band Massacre, who a bunch of guys that played in the band Death. Probably a much more well-known band. So these got a couple of guys that were in some of Death's early lineups. I think they played on Leprosy. Formed. Massacre was already going before that, but they stopped and played in Death for a while. Then a little while after that, they put out the sound From Beyond, and it's not the best Floridian death metal album. Like I don't like it as much as like classic Morbid Angel, classic Deicide, classic Monstrosity. It's a good, solid early '90s Floridian death metal album. Nothing wrong with it. And a couple of years later, they put out an album called Promise, which sounds like the worst goring hate-breed album ever. Slowed down, like the Sam's Club version of that. Photocopied 10 times. Thrown on the ground, rained on. It is so freaking terrible that you would never even think it's the same band. It's like they said, I don't know if they shoveled it into the studio, like you're contractually obligated to record an album. They just churned this out in a weekend because it sounds like nobody cares. The riffs, the vocals, the drumming, it's like, are we done yet? Can we, go to the bar after this? It's an abomination. And again, I don't think you can find it too easily now because I looked around for a couple years ago after I got this because I liked the first one so much, and I couldn't even find it. So maybe it was one of those deals where it went out of print and everybody's like, good, let's forget about that. But absolute shitter of an album. And this one, that's solid Florida death metal right there.
So that second album for completists only, I guess.
Yeah, even not
that.
It's completely. That's a very strong word of completist. Yeah, that's really kind of a. I don't think anybody should own it personally. Probably not even the band. But.
Yeah. I'm looking at Metal Archives, and there's 8 reviews, and out of 100%, those reviews average 7% out of 100.
There you go. 7
Just noticed that. Yeah.
That's about the level it is. It's just that terrible. It's just that bad of an album.
Yeah. Wow, good one.
That is bad.
Damn.
All right, Chris, what do you got?
All right, in 1991, there was a little bit of a buzz on this band called Mindfunk, and they had a bunch of guys that were in other bands. Reed St. Mark from Celtic Frost, the singer was from the hardcore band Uniform Choice, and one of the guys from MOD, and it was kind of like a heavy alternative band. They definitely were not a funk band, like, it wasn't like Red Hot Chili Peppers or Fishbone or anything like that. But I remember I was in Tower Records in Yonkers with my girlfriend at the time, and it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen because they had shrink wrapped a T-shirt of the album cover with the CD. So my girlfriend at the time got it because, of course, I wouldn't. I'm too fat to fit in the smalls and the mediums that they were giving away for free. But I thought it was so cool, and man, I loved the record. I totally fell in love with it. I went back and bought my own Sans T-shirt copy, and I totally dug it, man. It was kind of different. Like I said, heavy alternatives, the only thing I can think of. And then they wound up getting dropped by Epic Records, and they got signed by Megaforce. And so I guess they were trying to be cute when they named their second record Dropped, and it sucks. It totally blew. I heard it last night for the second time since 1991, and I'm like, yeah, this record totally sucks. They totally lost the fire and the edge that they had on the first record. They lost Reed St. Mark from Celtic Frost. So I hated that record. They did a third record, but I never bothered. And that's my pick. I was, dropped from Megaforce Records from Mindfunk, who I guess they were really trying to be cute. There's not even the band name or logo on it or whatever, and they wonder why they kind of fell into obscurity and went nowhere. So
I never even knew they released anything other than a debut.
Yeah,
that's all I've ever heard. Yeah,
they were on Megaforce, and they didn't release like at least a kind of heavy album. It's like,
much mellower than the first record, and I never heard the third record, which came out a couple of years after this. And but I really dig that first. I still listen to that first album. I think the name just killed them. They just couldn't get any traction with it. I'm sure everybody expected, Red Hot Chili Peppers or something.
It says here they were 1 year they called themselves Mind Fuck.
Yes,
but they weren't allowed to, so they had
the label made them change their name.
Yeah, but that's a half-assed name change because now, like you said, now you're changing the perception.
Right.
You should have just picked something completely different.
Yeah. Who was that other funk metal band? Mordred. Maybe people expected something like that.
Wow.
They were like a thrashy, funk kind of goofy thing. I don't know if you guys remember them, but
I remember the name. All right. So here's another example of, I actually like this album a lot, but it's kind of hard to follow up a debut that sells like, I don't know, 30 million copies or whatever. I don't even know however many copies it sells. So it's always, I don't know, however many it sold more than 10. And then your second album comes out and it only sells like 2 or 3 or whatever it sold. It's going to be labeled a disappointment. It's definitely not as good as the debut. I still like it, but the second album from Boston, Don't Look Back.
Yeah, I knew you were going there.
But it's just it's not quite the classic that the first one is, and in fact nothing they've done since has even come remotely close to that debut, but still really good. But a lot of people consider this a major disappointment just because of what it followed, and I think it was always going to be a major disappointment, right? So
every song was a hit on the first one. I mean, that's impossible to follow,
right? There's some great songs on here too, but on the whole it's like, and it took them a couple of years to get it out. It's, that's the whole Boston story. But I don't know. We got a couple minutes. Anybody else got any other ones they want to throw out there?
I just thought of one of my Fast Eddie's band. I love that first album.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And I don't like anything else they ever did.
Yeah, all fired up. I remember when it first came out, I was really hip to it. I was like, oh, great, because I love that debut. And I'm like, this is not quite that good.
No, and the Trick or Treat soundtrack is just
yeah,
I don't know. That was a waste of time. But that first one's amazing. The first one's great.
Yep.
Classic hard rock, through and through. Great album. Every song is awesome. And yeah, and they've got a couple. They probably some other stuff that I haven't even heard. But yeah, I just remember that. Yeah, all fired up. Not that good. Trick or Treat, even worse. First one, awesome.
Yep. Yep. How about this one?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, Lightning to the Nations is a
Awesome.
new wave of British heavy metal classic. I still really like this though. But you remember like when this first came out, like people who had heard the debut and then got this, and this was the first on a major label, like, wait a second, something ain't right. This is really different. It's kind of moody, kind of bluesy. It's like it's not like thrashy and heavy and all those riffs like the first one. I still dig it, but this is for a lot
Not a
of
bad
people.
album. I agree with you 100%.
I like it.
And, Angel Witch too. The first one, which is perfect,
Yeah.
and the second one, Screaming and Bleeding, which is still not a bad album, but I don't think nearly as good. The first Angel Witch is like, so if you took Iron Maiden out of the equation, that's like my favorite new wave of British heavy metal album.
Oh yeah, the first Angel Witch, yeah, that's classic.
Iron Maiden can't be fucked with, but yeah, other than them, that album's so good. And the Screaming and Bleeding just kind of, it's all right.
Yeah, this is a good topic because I remember recently reading the biography of the band Moonspell, and the singer Fernando was making a great point. He said, bands, their debut album is often music that they wrote over a long period of time. When they were first starting out, they had all the time in the world, and it's their whole heart and soul into it. And then all of a sudden, you get all the success, and then now the spotlight's on you, and it's like, okay, do it again. And you separate a lot of the wheat from the chaff with that. There's a lot of bands, like we mentioned, that for various reasons, some went on to good careers after that. But yeah, it's very difficult to get over yourself after your first album and do it again. That's to me,
Sure.
there's a shitload of bands that just never, could recover from that. So it's more difficult.
And sometimes the critics don't like it when a young band comes out with a great debut and then the second album kind of sounds a lot like it. They'll come down on you if it's too similar. Because one of my other picks here was In the Wake of Poseidon by King Crimson. They got a lot of flack for this because it sounded too much like the debut and was never going to be as good as the debut.
Right.
And that's
Still a great album though.
it's still absolutely, it's a great album. Yeah, it will never be as great as that debut, and it sounds really similar. It's almost like they recorded the same session, right? And by the time the album came out, Greg Lake was already gone from the band. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Well, I think we're almost out of time. So thanks guys for joining us yet again here, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. We'll be back again the same time next Monday. Steve Keeler will be back with us next week. He sat out this week. He didn't like this topic too much. So we're gonna rib him on that next week. But he gave us 2 really good topics for the next 2 episodes. So that's we'll be having that next time around. So take care, everybody. Guys, for Nick Franco, Ryan Skow, and Chris Allo, I am Pardo. Take care, everybody.